Do you know that Wizards of the Coast is going to be charging $30 a month to players and DMs who want to play D&D? Did you know that this gaming as service is going to be their prime model for making money? Did you know that they're working on AI DMs and so they won't need homebrew anymore? Did you know that they want to block all content from other creators, including Paizo, who produces Pathfinder, and Cadotte Press, their longtime partner? If you did, you've been scammed, because none of these things are true, as well as a whole bunch of other rumors. But there is some truth behind the ideas that drove these rumors to not only spread, but be plausible. This is Ill-Informed Opinions. I'm Joseph Cadotte. I've said before, I've been playing D&D for roughly 40 years and other role-playing games for roughly 39. So, I've seen the industry from not the beginning, but closer than a lot of you. And I've seen a lot of failures. I've seen a lot of problems that were created by other companies and many created by TSR, which was Wizards of the Coast precursor in owning the D&D license. And they've had a hard time on occasion. Many of us remember D&D 4.0, the 4th edition, which is what it is. Probably the best massively multiplayer online role-playing game simulator that you can have for tabletop. So, if that's what you like, but it's great for that. But we are concerned with Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition and how Wizards has screwed up and how Wizards has tried to rectify this problem that they have made for themselves, and why a lot of people are angry and believe rumors like that. First off, let's address some of the issues. The $30 subscription may or may not be true. However, it would be limited to DMs who are using all the features of a virtual tabletop that provides a whole host of resources and models and so on, and they would be in effect paying for their players to do the same thing. We know this because that's exactly the sort of thing that other virtual tabletops that offer exactly the same service at a similar price point and do. So that part, there's a chance it's true. Now, is it true that I don't use a virtual tabletop? I don't understand the point of them, but more importantly, they confuse me and scare me like I'm a little child when I try to get anything to work and it never does. So, doesn't matter to me. Won't matter to most of you. Most of you will not be using virtual tabletops. Does that mean that we can ignore this issue? No, it does not. It means that this is a way that they tend to monetize D&D. And that is something that Hasbro has stated for Wizards of the Coast quite publicly, that they want to monetize D&D. This includes things like NFTs, which, as I've discussed before, are complete scams, and other sorts of ways to bilk you out your money. How much will the virtual tabletop they produce cost? I don't know. I mean, people at Hasbro know, but that's about it. Everybody else is just guessing at this point because we don't even know its full capabilities. They claim a lot of things. It could be like Neverwinter Nights, which was a version that worked with D&D 3.0 and 3.5, and you could build your own. And I tried many times, and I do not have the patience for it, but more power to the people who do. And that was a upfront purchase which was actually pretty high, and then everything else was free from that point on. Could be like that, although I doubt it. I think it'd probably be more along the lines of a subscription to allow you to use their rendered objects and so on. One of the problems which they are getting themselves into is that they want to eliminate their competition on virtual tabletops that go beyond simulating the static experience of being a tabletop role-playing game. In other words, they want to make a virtual tabletop that's basically a video game and then ban other people from doing that. I think that's a bad idea. Competition tends to grow the market. Monopolization tends to shrink the market. They do better by charging a licensing fee to their competitors, who would, of course, pass it on to you, and letting, competition work its wonders, which would improve both Wizards' product and other products, and probably ultimately draw people to Wizards in terms of what they're going to use. So that's the strategy I would take. That probably isn't the strategy they're going to take. So this is consistent with the new open gaming license that they have just posted. And let's get to that. Their previous problems with the prior open gaming license were many, but the two biggest ones were in terms of intellectual property, which affected me since I'm a content creator for D&D. And if you want to play my content, contact me directly. The information is at the end of this video or in the description below. You should be able to send me a message or put a comment, and I'll let you playtest what I'm working on, which is an modern urban fantasy version of 5th edition. So that affected me directly. And then there were royalties, which I'm never going to be able to sell enough of this to make a difference, but they were exorbitant. And that would have put a kibosh on a lot of other people who do a much better job than I do at creating this stuff. So let's look at these two problems and how Wizards has solved these in the new version of the open gaming license. Let's do the last one first. Royalties. Now, I do not object to Wizards gaining a percentage of sales from licensed materials. I think that's their right, and I think they have every right to ask for a small percentage in exchange for using their intellectual property. I know that if I had such a large base and was allowing people to work in it, as Wizards does, that I would want to charge royalties for official licensing. Either that or work directly with the company or people doing so. I don't plan on doing that, but I'll never see that kind of money anyways, so it's moot. But I understand why they would want to, and they have every right to, because they put a huge amount of effort in. As anybody who has looked at the playtesting for 5th edition initial, when it was called New D&D, or whatever words they were using at the time, through 1 D&D, and of course all their work with 3rd edition. So, I don't begrudge them that. What I do begrudge them is the fact they were asking 20 to 25% royalties off the gross of $750 or higher. That is too much too soon, and not having a scale which it goes up and up and up. So, for example, like 1% at from 750 to $1 million, to 3% for $1 million to $2 million in sales, etc., or just a flat 5%. I could go with those. That would make sense to me, and I think that'd be a small price to pay. 20 to 25% at $750,000. You can hit that with a successful Kickstarter. Again, I won't. But other people can and have. And that's how they fund their work. And so that's gross. That's not net. That means that that's part of the money that goes to pay for people to do their thing. That's not profit. That's everything that you take in. So that's a big difference. If they were charging it on the net, it's easier to defend, but still excessive. But it'd be easier to defend. But since they weren't, now, Wizards has walked this back and said that they will be not charging royalties. Again, that's their right, just as much as charging royalties was their right. I am grateful for that. Like I said before, I think they are due some royalties by virtue of all the effort they've put in and the fact that we're all building off of that. But zero is a lot closer to the 5%, 10% that I think they deserve than the 20 to 25% that they were asking. So I'm happy with that. And the fact that I don't have to pay royalties is a great deal to me, too. Second, and more important for me, is Wizards wanted to have complete control over the IP. That included the ability to what they call license back material that was created by a third party and grab it and use it as their own without payment or compensation of any sort. This is problematic because I want to make this clear. They have every right to do that. They have the initial IP that all this is based on. So they can do this. They can also stop anybody making anything, any fan films or anything like this, or any podcasts, etc. They have absolutely that right to do anything where it's distributed for a price or not used under fair use. For example, a review of a game or a commentary on the game itself would be fair use. Making new content to be used in the game does not fall under fair use any more than I can make a story set in Castle Rock, Maine, and claim Stephen King's imprimatur on it, okay? So when you make new content for D&D, you are doing so at their grace, and you always have been. I want that to be very clear. That said, as someone who makes new content for D&D, I've been relying on the Open Gaming License version 1.0a. And, on top of that, I was really freaked out by the idea that they may grab every asset that I've made. Because I've made a lot of stuff. Not as much as an actual, company which has actual employees and artists, as opposed to whoever I can convince to, spend some time for way too little money to do some artwork. No. While they had the right, that is chilling to me. And I actually started pursuing other alternatives to 5th edition. This makes me a little upset. This made me a little upset because 5th edition is by far the easiest thing for me to work in when I create new worlds and new environments and this urban fantasy thing I've been working on. I also have a science fantasy far future thing. Both of which were easy to make in 5th edition. The only thing, too, that came close were GURPS and Savage Worlds. Savage Worlds is easier to make stuff in. GURPS has more depth. GURPS requires a lot more nitty-gritty stuff than Savage Worlds. So, Savage Worlds is more lightweight. If you are interested in making stuff and you don't want to use 5th edition, I recommend those two. And apparently Cobalt Press is making their own thing, too. There's also Pathfinder, but I'm not sure how easy it is to make things. And I imagine it'll be like 3rd edition, which is not as easy as GURPS, but coming close. So this really bothered me. Again, though, they've walked this back. They had to walk this back because everybody under the sun was like me and saying, I don't feel like I can develop for Wizards anymore. I can't even create anything which can be shared non-privately because for fear that they'll take it back. If they want to do a modern version, Evil Genius Games does a modern version of 5th edition. But if I want to do my own modern version, which is very distinct from what Wizards does, they can just grab that under OGL 1.1. But they have changed that. They can no longer do that. They make it explicit that as creators, we own our rights except for things which they initially owned the rights of first. And let's get to that. There's a thing called Creative Commons. Creative Commons basically puts content under a different umbrella, literally owned by a different corporation or corporate entity, because I don't know if it's a nonprofit or a company or what, but it's a corporate entity that maintains this stuff and will constantly own it and make it licensed for free without explicit license. Okay? In other words, it functionally is, although not explicitly, but functionally is in the public domain, which is great. Okay? Now, some of the stuff they put on, they're doing that now with OpenGL 1.2. Some of the stuff they're doing that is going under Creative Commons is stuff they have to basically make public domain. These are game mechanics, which, like recipes and so on, or mathematical formulas, you just simply can't protect with intellectual property laws. Okay? If you think you can, then no one can do it. That's why everybody was able to make chocolate chip cookies after the people at Toll House made them, or ranch dressing after the people at Hidden Valley Ranch made them. Because it's a recipe. As soon as it leaks, everybody can make it. Game mechanics are fundamentally leaked because that's the very nature of them. You can't really make them a corporate secret, so here we are. Now they're putting other things, though, that they don't have to put under Creative Commons or into the public domain, into the Creative Commons, and that's great. We have yet to see fully what those things are, because there's a new source resource document, which is what the basic game will be. By the way, if you want to play D&D for free, you can download the source resource document. That it's a good resource to have, even if you're not terribly interested in creating, simply because if you don't have D&D Beyond or anything like this, it's a good way to look up the basic rule set and so on. So I recommend doing that. But there's working on a new one, so we don't know what everything that's going to be in there. We're pretty sure that some races and classes aren't going to be in that, or a few other things. This doesn't, but the new language that they're using means that you can make your own and they can't grab it. The language they used in 1.1, the thing everyone's upset about, meant that you could make your own classes and then they could steal it. They can't do that anymore, so that's good. So basically, a lot of stuff is out there. Now, there are things that they're not going to ever license, which makes sense, which is the artwork. So as they point out, you can use something like an owlbear. You can call it an owlbear. You can have the stats of an owlbear. You can have the description of an owlbear, but you cannot use Wizards artwork. And this makes sense from two different perspectives. First perspective is they may have a rights issue between themselves and the artist. They may have purchased the rights for specific types of use, such as digital distribution or print distribution, but not have gotten the rights for licensing further beyond that, okay? So, to third parties. So, that's one thing. Second thing is, these aren't necessary for you to run your game. You don't need to have Wizard's picture of an owlbear for you to run a game where everything takes place in your mind. So it's not a loss, really, if I put out my thing and I have an owlbear as a something that lives in Appalachia, for example, and I decide I want to use a Wizard's image. No, I have to commission someone to draw it, and that's fine. And I think that's a good idea. It definitely makes my life easier in terms of rights, and I'm sure it makes Wizards and the initial artists thing easier, because otherwise there's trickles of royalties going up and down, and it's just a mess. So they have decided that the other stuff, like classes and races and so on, which may or may not be under the Creative Commons, we don't know yet, will be under their SRD, this document that we can all pull from. That's where the OGL, or Open Game License, comes in, okay? This is important to understand. The stuff that's in the Creative Commons, you don't have to tell anybody you're doing it, okay? You don't have to, I mean, it's good if you do. I just want to make this very clear. You should, but because, again, as part of game license, as well as the fact that game mechanics can't be copyrighted, patented, trademarked, etc., you don't have to cite them. This is why you can have copies of Monopoly everywhere. But the other stuff, which they are withholding, is part of this SRD, this document, and that you have to sign up for the open game license for. It's very similar to 1.0A, which has been the one that has worked thus far. There are a few additions to it, but they've walked back most of the problematic areas. So this stuff isn't included. You have to sign it, and then you have to include the new OG Open Gaming License 1.2 inside. This was a burden you had to have initially with 1.0A. A lot of the things that people are complaining about 1.2, including some of the stuff I am, are in 1.0A. I mean, and you can't really complain too much about it because you've been living with it for 20 odd years. I mean, I will continue to complain about it, but still. Now, so they've solved most of the problems that people have had. And frankly, I'm glad they did that. I'm glad that someone, up over there in Wizards basically told Hasbro that this isn't going to work, and they saw the protests, and they saw, very importantly, D&D Beyond subscriptions dropping. I can't drop that because I got way too much stuff. But if you're a player who only has a few characters, you do not need D&D Beyond. Okay? You need a pen and paper or a Google Docs. That's all you need. If you create a bunch of monsters and so on, D&D Beyond is great. If you're just a player, it's a nice thing. You can use it. You don't have to use it. It's fine. So, the D&D Beyond boycott worked really well. Surprisingly so. So there's two problems, though, that remain that I have. Besides, of course, the whole issue of them not licensing the virtual tabletops. But the biggest problems they have are twofold. The first is they prefer to use arbitration, which is common. And they want everything to go through the laws of... And then that's the problem. They don't say which jurisdiction is the preferred jurisdiction. I'm not sure they have to. I am absolutely not a lawyer. But it would be useful if they said that default jurisdiction is Rhode Island, which is where Hasbro's located, United States. And why is this important? Because there are intellectual property rules are similar across most of the Western world, but not 100% so. For example, and this dovetails into something else, if you engage in problematic speech, well, you can get your license pulled. But define problematic speech. The United States' free speech laws are extremely open. They're the most open in the Western world. And so I can say, do a World War II themed one, which has swastikas for the baddies, because the baddies had swastikas. If I was going to publish this in Germany, however, that would be offensive, and that would violate the law. And, I mean, I understand why Germany doesn't want swastikas around. I mean, I think most of us can figure that out. But that would be deemed offensive, and so they could pull my license. Would it be just the license in Germany? Would it be licensed globally? So we need to understand these things. Quebec has a bill named Bill 21, which passed in 2019, 2017, and it started to be worked on and was passed in 2019 with broad acclaim, which bars people from expressing their religion openly, especially if you're Muslim, because it's specifically targeted towards apparel and things like hijabs and so on. So, Quebec Bill 21 has been upheld by the Quebec courts as being viable, and Canada actually has the most restricted speech laws of any Western nation. So if I portrayed someone positively who's a devout Muslim who wears a hijab, that could be deemed offensive under Bill 21 in Quebec. Fine, the rest of Canada. But in Quebec, the Alabama of the North, it's problematic. And so I don't want and because I do present day stuff, there will be Muslim characters that will be portrayed positively and some will be portrayed negatively, just like anybody else. But I do not want to have my stuff pulled because, the Quebec Parliament is full of a bunch of bigots, or at least enough bigots. And currently that's the case. So this needs to be explicated. I'm sure better people than I, smarter people than I, who actually have IP law degrees, can answer these questions and will help make this so that it's not confusing, I hope. They do have a survey Wizards does for open gaming license, and I recommend every one of you fill it out. That's how they're going to get their information. These videos are community to community. They are not stuff that Wizards will care about. I mean, there's a small chance they might watch it. Even smaller if it's me. But the other problem is one that we saw once they started changing Drow to be not all black all the time and giving them different skin tones, that we saw with allowing elves to change gender. There's a lot of people who get offended by D&D isn't the way it used to be. In other words, all male all the time. Now, part of the problem starts at the beginning. Gygax specifically stated that only 1 in 100 women would actually understand D&D. So there are these old school players who've been with the game the longest, about as long as I have, maybe less, who get upset about things like, how woke it's become, and the fact that there are girls there and boys who are gay or openly gay, and so on, and they can't be the total pervs they wanted to be. By the way, sex and role-playing at a table, ick. If you want to do it, though, here's what you do. Dexterity to see how good you were, and dexterity to see how good they were, and charisma to see how charming you were, charisma to see how charming they were, wisdom to actually, do it right. Those are the 3 roles. Do not much embellish. So it's really fun when you get a natural 1 on those. Anyways, so there's provisions in there saying that you can't make things that are racist, homophobic, etc., except they don't really talk about what constitutes racist, homophobic, etc., or what I would call the protected classes. And this is problematic because, again, what I talked about before, which things can be deemed offensive depending on jurisdiction. So that's an issue. Why it's important that they do this, and I haven't seen anybody else talk about this, is there was a game called Star Frontiers, which was put out by TSR, and I loved this game, Star Frontiers. I loved it to death, and it's Nighthawk's expansion. And Wizards of the Coast has been in litigation with the people who own TSR. That's the, again, original company, which is Ernie Gygax, and he worked with the 2 other people and to make a version of Star Frontiers. Let me tell you, here's a quote from Star Frontiers, the new Genesis, which is what they've said, is that races in Star Frontiers New Genesis are not unlike races in the real world. Some are better at certain things than others, and some races are superior to others. Uh, they describe ugly people as people who have large noses, uh, large lips, uh, thin lips, oval eyes, or any of their number of stereotypical non-Nordic features. They say that the Nordic subrace of humanity has a minimum intelligence stats of 13, whereas the let's just say black people has a maximum intelligence of 9. So they clearly are saying we don't want any of the same stuff that the Star Frontiers New Genesis people are pulling. And that's legitimate, and there's a lot of good reason for it. That they've been embroiled in a suit with TSR over this for years. They have officially pulled any licensing or anything they could for Star Frontiers as of September 2022 because of a leaked document which listed these things, which I quoted in the most part. I'm not going to quote some of the things which are, well, for example, another thing, gender options are male, female with no bonuses, which, by the way, is an improvement from the original D&D 1, where women could not be as strong as men. And no trans people, although they don't say it's people. Yeah, they refer to trans people as... No, never mind. It's not as bad as it could be. It's not as bad as you're imagining, but it's still pretty bad. So, defining what they find offensive and what constitutes a protected class in terms of, like, don't make things which are directly in opposition to this ethos. Basically, if you're the sort of person who is, quote, a SJW pushing your values on others, also from Star Frontiers, that's the sort of people they want to ban. People who would say something like that. And I understand that there are some of you who feel that way. However, as a company, not only is it bad policy to discriminate against people where the state itself does not allow you to discriminate people if you live in the United States and you engage in like hiring practices and so on, but it also alienates the vast majority of your current fan base. So, bad policy all around, and I support them for doing this. I just wish they were more explicit. So, on the whole, I'm optimistic. Most of the problems I have could be solved by being more explicit, which would only serve to help them, and rethinking their arbitration system. So, I'm going to continue developing for 5th edition. And if you're interested, please contact me. I'll give you a rough draft, which is what I have, and you can do so yourself. If you develop something you like, I'll include it, credit you. Can't afford to give you any money for it, because I'm going to be making bupkis from this. But, I love participants, and this will be 5e, unless they do something amazingly stupid. Fill out the survey for the Open Game License version 1.2. You can find it at the D&D Beyond website. And thank you for watching. And any comments, questions, rebukes, rants, insults are welcome in the comments below. I'll engage even with QAnon people, even though I'm not going to spend any of my time trying to promote your ideas. So, which happened last time, which is weird.